And I just really want to quickly introduce myself and everybody else. I'm Patrick Yurick, one of the owners of Little Fish Comic Book Studio. Alonso, my partner, is over there. We create the comic book America Boom, and we run educational classes for comic books out of our studio in Ocean Beach, California. The participants of the 1 week comic challenge are sitting up in front of you, and they're going to introduce themselves and say their ages, where they're from, and why they like comics.
Hi, I'm Josiah, and I'm 16. I live here in San Diego, and I just recently started to get really into comics, and I love it because it's really guitar.
Hi, I'm Jeremy. I'm a native of San Diego, and I'm 18 years old. And I love comics because, well, ever since I could hold a pencil, I've been drawing, but comics were just kind of a normal follow-up to that upbringing. So,
Hi, I'm Isabella. I live in San Diego. I'm 11 years old. I love comics because they don't only tell you a story, they also give you a picture to visualize.
Hello, my name is Arthur Villanueva. I'm 15 years old. I live here in San Diego. And I love comics because not only do you get to incorporate art within a story, but you can also use that for humor, drama, mystery, anything else.
Hi, I'm Alonso. I'm one of the owners of Little Fish Comic Book Studio. I think I'm the oldest one up here. I'm 33. I'm an aged 33 years of age. And I love comics because I have a very visual brain, and I love telling stories, and the only way I can do that is visually.
Hi, I'm Albert, and I'm 31 and from San Diego. I've always liked comics ever since I could first remember. I love Spider-Man, and I've always looked up to him.
So the 1 week comic challenge is this pretty amazing challenge that we just started this year, and it was kind of a take on the 24-hour comic challenge, but with a bigger project-based twist. So the idea here is that we get 9 students. So these were only 6 of the 9 students. The other students, can you raise your hand who are in here? Who created the comic? They're in the bios. They're all here. So these guys chose the members up here to be the presenters from their groups. They split into 3 small groups to take on a challenge that started Monday morning at 9 a.m. So Monday morning at 9 a.m. we didn't have a comic. We have a printed comic here. Do you want to hold one of them up? We actually have them down at the booth. That comic actually now exists and is for sale down at booth IO3. So this was done within the last 6 days. No part of the comic was started before that point. And I really want to recognize that that is a seemingly impossible feat because I did not necessarily believe it could be done either. So the whole idea was that the students would come here and present their finished comic book, and we set that up before we actually set up the parameters for the project. And the idea of the comic is you see this kind of Superman character on the front, and to commemorate the 75th anniversary of Superman, we charged the students with creating a retelling of Superman to fit 2013. So like if superheroes hadn't existed for the last 75 years, what would the first one look like now? And from right when they walked in the door, a lot of them didn't know each other. How many of you actually knew each other before you came in?
I think I kind of knew Efren because we go to the same school, but I knew German because of an activity we did for their children's museum, but not really anything else.
Yeah, so the students came in, they got together in groups, they had to come up with brainstorming. We had pitches by 11 a.m. that day, so we had 2 hours to come up with a story. That night's homework was creating the script and doing the thumbnails, which Alonso and I taught them how to do that day. The next day, we had Marvel comic book artist Klaus Jansen come in and work with the students and this was a big deal, because it's not like Alonso and I don't know how to make comics, but we really wanted somebody,
Most of the time.
Yeah, we really wanted somebody who had that legitimacy that extends back like into the amazingness of comic book history. And Klaus Jansen is definitely the person who whose hand reaches back. The whole day on Wednesday, he did individual critiques for about an hour to an hour and a half each with each one of the groups, and looked at their pages and looked at what they composed to get them ready for inking. They inked, and by 10 a.m. Thursday morning, they had to turn in their work. I rode my bike from the convention center on 10 a.m. to a print shop, to a local Hey Chris printing, and I just camped out and laid out the book. I got back here for an event at 5 p.m. that day, and we had the printed comics by yesterday afternoon. And we've been selling them. We actually have sold probably half of them in the last 2 days, so it's pretty good. I briefly want to have the students kind of go through and talk about what they contributed individually, and then also like what did their group, what was the stories. So let's start with the stories, and then we'll do the individual contributions. Okay?
So I did a story about this guy named Chunk, who's a young teenager. He's kind of on the larger side and likes to eat a lot of food, which is okay. And so it was me, Victor, who's not here right now, is in our booth, Evan, and Al. And so we pretty much wanted to create this story of a larger superhero, to be a hero that was the superhero with this radioactive hot dog, and it gets this crazy power to suck in all the fast food around the world, and it makes him into this Hulk-like huge character. And so what I mainly did, I did a lot of the inking and I did a whole splash page. I did 2 panels, so a lot of what I did was helping out with the illustration and coming up with the character design and all that kind of stuff. So if you want to kind of say something about that, what you did with the group.
Excuse me, what? Oh,
Yeah, just say what maybe you did and a little bit.
okay, my portion of this was basically to affirm my support. I tried not to totally persuade everything because, first of all, when the prompt was Superman today, I thought, hey, why don't you just make a character like Superman? And that's wrong. But I really liked Josiah's pitch idea, which was about to take on the problem of obesity. And I commend him because he did the entire first, maybe the second day over Google Hangouts, and it all worked. And he wasn't physically there, but he was, I can say, spiritually there, and he really helped our group out.
Yeah, for the first 2 days, Josiah was on a family vacation in Cabo, so the only way for him to participate in group activities was to phone in through Google Hangouts and actually be a part of this 21st century kind of learning experience, which he did an awesome job. He came through for his group. So.
I want to also mention, I don't think Josiah mentioned this, Josiah also laid out the cover, which I think turned out phenomenal. I tried not to mess it up.
Jeremy and Isabella, do you want to go over your story?
So, Isabella and I, and Rachel, who's sitting in the audience, we worked on a story called On, which is a superhero who has the ability to travel into the internet and control computers and all electronics. And the way we came up with this was like, well, what kind of powers would be the most effective in this day and age in 2013 when we talked about how globalized the world is becoming because of the internet and how dependent on the internet and on technology we are. And so we thought that if the superhero were to be, first superhero were to be created today, he would have some sort of involvement with the internet since it's so all-consumingly important.
So he accidentally gets transported across this big old virus bug. Then he, as he explores the internet, finds the good things about the internet and the bad things as well.
So what'd you guys do? What were your particular sections of the
Yes, I
book?
forgot about that. I worked, well, we all worked on brainstorming. I worked, the biggest contribution I did personally was I did the pencils for all 5 of the pages, and I worked on inks for 2 of them.
Yeah, I designed the characters.
She also worked on the first page.
And also Rachel, who's in the audience in the front row. Want to raise your hand, Rachel? Rachel also helped with the inks.
Efren, and we're going to shamelessly plug Efren's debut comic book, Squids and Rainbows, that came out this weekend as well.
I conveniently have it in my pocket.
Well played.
He was ready for a plug. Efren's a full-time student at Little Fish Comic Book Studio and has been working on this webcomic called Squids and Rainbows for the past 8 months, 9 months, something like that. And it's awesome. So, and you only have what, 5 copies left? You sold out of your 50 copy run that you did?
I think we have around 5-10 copies left.
Yeah, that's pretty good. So, Efren, what did your group work on? What was your story?
Well, our story is about a man who has the ability to project energy from his hands and eyes. It's about how he tries to stop these police officers from evicting an innocent family out of their own home in a corrupt part of Tijuana. And it's funny, actually, because we thought of this character, like this whole concept, based off of misunderstanding the instructions on the first day. I don't quite know what happened, but I think our beginning idea was something like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if Superman was a poor, mute, homeless guy who lived in a third world country? And then we realized that was way too bleak for this project, so we just narrowed it down to make it a little bit more, like, not as deep. And when we decided to stick with I decided to stick with the third world country because last school year we went, in my English class, we went over a lot of corruption that was happening in other countries like Iran, Korea, all these places. And it was insane what I heard. I mean, there was public beatings, hangings, and no one was stopping this. So I thought it would be interesting to make a character who actually could do something about it.
Cool. Well, that definitely brings us to our first question that I asked the panel, which was like, what's one thing you would have changed if you could go back to Monday and like start? Well, not that we have to do that because that sounds very tiring, but if we had to go back to Monday and start again, what's something that you would have changed about how you faced the challenge of creating this page? By the way, the constraints were it was 3 to 5 pages of comic book that they had to create, and they didn't do any colors. They had to do all hand lettering. So this is also using, I'll go through that a little bit. They had to use an Ames guide, which is like the old school style of like comic book lettering. There was no digital focus in the class except for the fact that we laid it out digitally for the printer. The students really focused on inking and penciling, especially with Klaus in town. Like that was really what we wanted them to like be working on with Klaus because he is one of the most renowned inkers and pencilers ever. So it was really important that they worked with him on that. Alonso actually taught them a little bit about the lettering and layouts. I worked on them with script writing and thumbnails, which is what we kind of do for American Boom, our comic. So going back to that question, what's something you would have changed now that you're at the end of the project if you were starting back?
I actually understood the instructions the first time. I probably would not have made the story as deep as I was anticipating on making it, because I'm not used to working with deadlines as tight as this, so I thought, oh, I have all the time in the world. I thought I could just work out a page like that. As it turns out, I barely made the deadline. So I would have made it
How many, did anybody else feel similarly, like they might have scaled back on the quantity or something about their work? Had they gone back, or was the quantity pretty good?
Personally, I think the quantity was fine for our comic, but like, one thing I would have done was maybe change how we laid out the story and like, the pacing of it. I mean, maybe I would have taken out some of the parts that weren't completely necessary for the story. It might have been easier to pace it.
What do you mean specifically?
Like, there are some scenes that aren't like incredibly necessary to the plot. There's like a certain scene that's just like there for laughs, which is still like really funny, but it didn't have to be there. And
Which one was it?
Where he gets chased around the internet by the young cat.
Oh, so it's like page 4 panels, like one. It's like the whole of page 4, right?
It's most of page 4. And if that hadn't been in there, then I'm glad it's in there. It's hilarious. But if it hadn't been in there, then maybe we would have had like better pacing and certain things in the comic that are kind of structured weird or paneled weird. It might have been easier to fix those.
Alonso, what was some of your reflections at the end of the process?
More time. As a professional artist, always more time. I honestly though, I think I would have enjoyed a little bit more time just to see how these kids would have, kids, I don't mean to be condescending. How these students, really though, they did an amazing job for artists that are just learning a lot of these skills for the first time. They did an amazing job. Art's never going to be perfect, but kind of maybe refine them a little bit more and spend a little bit more time with the inks and the lettering, a lot of the production stuff. But it's a rough masterpiece, as I like to call it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I feel like as an instructor for this whole process, like, is we go into doing this next year. I already have like a ton of things in my head that I want to change, but I really felt though that this was one of the most enjoyable collaborative comic processes I've ever been a part of. Mostly because all of these students were extremely excited to just keep working. I mean, Josiah, came to me Thursday morning. He's like, I didn't sleep last night. I was like, good. That's like what I want to hear for students to get their sleep. But that kind of dedication is like, it makes me feel I'm normal. Like that staying up late to meet those deadlines is a part of the process, and that's really amazing. What would you have for advice for students next year who take this? Isabella, what would you, if you were talking to a student who was going to take this and was like, I'm super excited to do this next summer, like, what would you say to them? What would your one piece of advice be?
Well, I would say work hard, definitely, because even for me, it was very challenging, honestly, being younger than pretty much all the group. At first, I was scared to do the inking because I think I'd mess up. And yeah, so just work at it. You never know what you could accomplish.
How about now? What would you give for advice for next year?
My advice would be I read Patrick's reflection, just meet your deadlines, try your hardest, and like Klaus said, or someone, it might have been Patrick, just who cares what your first draft is. If the deadline is right then, just accept it. It's art.
Yeah, I think a really big part of the 24-hour comic challenge and this one-week comic challenge is really like hitting this point. Because I think a lot of people focus a lot on making art look awesome, but they don't really get to experience the sheer bliss of actually meeting a deadline. Even if the work isn't where you want it to be, you always got next time to do it. And I think that was one of the big things that we sat on. Now, you mentioned Klaus. I kind of want to hear some Klaus stories from the class. Just something that you thought was memorable from your time. I mean, working with this like world-renowned Marvel and DC comic.
Well, we got to work with Klaus, and we got to look at all of our panels and how we were doing to critique us and see give us feedback. And one thing he told us was that we had a ton of panels on one page, which doesn't really fly. it's not done right, and ours was really done right. We couldn't really change it because we had a deadline. And I asked a lot of questions and gave a lot of things that I knew we could change. And I felt like I was one of the few people who, talked a lot to Klaus, and he kept coming back to me and saying, it's like, just not do everything yet. And I was like, you just say that to me? Like, it's kind of just weird to be there with Klaus, actually interacting with him. Like, he's no human being like anyone else. So, very cool.
Yeah, it was incredibly nerve-wracking to put my pencils in front of Klaus Jansen, who is like the comic book artist, and I kind of gingerly put down the pages in front of him. I was like, here are the pages. Oh God, don't hurt me. But it was amazing. Like when he looked at my pages and started talking about them. He's basically just a living font of comics information, and you just hope that you can retain all of the stuff he tells you because it's genius and brilliant, and he looks at the tiniest little details of your comic and he's like, maybe if you added 3 lines here, it would make the entire panel be perfect and explain exactly what you wanted to do. And I'm like, how did you do that? And it was inspiring, and I loved every second of it. I nerded out big time.
I have to say the most memorable part for me is when he taught us how to ink, because so far I've been self-taught. I've never really gotten any good advice on how to do inking with a brush. I've never tried it. I've only used pens and read from books and pretty much done it by myself. So I thought that was really useful and helpful.
I truly believe that Klaus is the Yoda of the comic world. I mean, it is amazing how precise he is, how he pays attention to the smallest detail, as Jeremy said. I remember we were showing him our pencils for our comic strip, and he was looking at one panel in particular, and it was a close-up of this guy grabbing another guy's wrist. And he says, "What is this?" And we said, "Oh, well, it's a guy grabbing another guy's wrist." And he says, something like, how's the audience supposed to know this? We said, "Oh, well, it's kind of obvious." He said, "No!" And he spends the next 20 minutes telling us about storytelling and how he never assumed that the audience would know anything. And now I know much more than I did.
What really inspired me about classes when he was talking about how he thinks and what his mentors taught him. See, I missed out on probably about 15 years of my artwork because of my disability, and all my art is all one-dimensional on paper. And he was saying that you have to make one-dimensional, three-dimensional to die. And I was, because you can see the characters sticking out at you a lot in comic books. And the way he said how he does it is he makes thicker, bolder ink lines on the shoulders muscle. And when it gets under the tricep, it gets a little thinner lines. And that just made sense. And I know I've still got a lot to learn, even though I'm older than these guys, but these guys are a lot better than me.
So we got about 15 minutes left of the panel. I can't believe the time has gone that fast. Does anybody in the audience have any questions that they'd like to shout out? And if you do, feel free. I can insert my own question. But if you do have some questions, start thinking about them. I'll try to answer some of those.
Patrick, just right before we jump into Q&A, I just wanted to kind of pass along something from Klaus. Klaus has got some prior commitments as someone of his stature does. And I'll plug someone that does not need plugging. Klaus is down in 4807, selling original art and signing stuff. When you're starting your artistic career, and even as you're continuing it, two of the hardest things are the discipline to hit your deadlines and to finish work, even when you'd like to keep on working on it, and to have the humility to kind of take critiques, whether they're from peers or whether they're from industry legends like Klaus Jansen or anyone in between, like me and Patrick. And Klaus was incredibly impressed. Klaus teaches at the School of Visual Arts in Manhattan, teaches a sophomore level class, and he was incredibly impressed with these students, that they were able to meet those deadlines, have that discipline and take critiques. They were really open to suggestions and ideas, and knock them out of the park in the heart. So just wanted to add that.
It was kind of funny because I expected Thursday morning. This isn't like me not believing in you guys, but I've been teaching for about 5 years, and I so expected at least 2 pages not to be turned in. I was like, minimum 2 pages are not going to be turned in. But sure enough, at 10 a.m., I had every single page in my hand. I did not have to go track down any one of the students. Each group turned in their stuff, and I have to say that this was like I just feel like I went through the most flawless teaching experience that I could have ever gone through, and I'm like, wow, that's what that feels like. I want to thank you guys for giving that to me as a teacher, and I think Alonso feels the same way. This was not a hard thing to teach. It was actually quite enjoyable. It was hard not getting as much sleep as we could have, but you guys get sleep later. Questions? Is there anything that benefited you from having actually a tight deadline that you can look back and say that you got from this?
Yes. Having a tight deadline meant, and like a very short amount of pages, meant that we had to focus on what we really wanted to get across in the short amount of time we had to tell a story, and we couldn't allow ourselves to dwell on like little details that would usually hold you back from creating a story, and it was kind of liberating actually. Like, oh, I don't actually have to think about this character's backstory or like what his motives are. He's just going to be in the middle of a fight with a giant bug virus and be punching him in the face, and that's all the explanation you really need. And it made it a lot easier to do things.
Yeah, I think it was good for me, the deadline. Like he said, it was good to have such a short amount of pages because I have a habit of expanding story so long, it takes you a century to read it. That's what happened to me in school in some projects. So it allowed me to get rid of some things and give me more of a story you can read. I mean, this is a good story, it doesn't last forever.
Yeah, and as I said before, I've never had a deadline this short before. I've had weeks, even months, to finish individual Squids and Rainbows comic strips, but I've never had days to finish 5-page, 6 pennies on each page comic strip. So this was certainly a challenge, but it really taught me just not focus directly on quality, but on getting the work done.
And with me, the same thing really. My group had to really focus on, working together and getting a good story in the short amount of time we had. And go with the ideas that first came into our head. Not necessarily if it's the best idea, but it made sense and it made a story and it was good.
I think that the deadlines help a lot because in the future, if you get a career in anything, you're going to have to meet your deadlines. So this is definitely something that helps out later on, and it also helped me and our group come up with an idea quick and just go with it instead of having to think too much about it. So I think that, and it also came out to be an idea that we enjoyed doing. So
The only confession I have to make at this point is that we originally called it the 2-week comic project. But just letting you know now that we can't do anything about it.
Now that we're done.
Now that we're done. That's a lot. Alonso and I were like, that's too long.
And they're too tired still to read books.
it wasn't even a week.
Let's just pile Comic-Con and the 1-week comic project all together and get it over with. No, going back to like the theme of the comic, Superman, right? Like we really looked at the 75th anniversary of Superman. We actually looked really deeply at the early stages of how Superman was developed by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, and these like 17-year-old kids that came up with this idea for a hero that exemplified all of the things that they wanted out of their own life. And then we said, forget everything about that and just use that story as an inspiration. So what was that like? How did your stories end up reflecting that, do you feel like? Like how did they reflect what Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster created for their original Superman creation? In your stories?
Well, our hero is obviously not a big old buff guy, so, and a lot of things to do with Superman is Superman pretty much is from another planet, so he's an alien, and he saves people in pretty much any situation. And our superhero has a situation where there's a guy at a hot dog stand who's robbing it, and he pretty much just shows that from being a kid who gets pushed out of line into being this kid who defeats the robber. So that was kind of our premise of kind of giving it to the 75th anniversary of Superman.
For our hero, like, the biggest thing we focused on that related to the 75th anniversary was that Superman, when Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster created him, was kind of made to solve the problems of the time, and so we converted our hero to solve the problems of this day and age. And well, it was a hero for our time rather than a hero for Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster's time.
Out of the three stories, and not that I'm picking favorites, but the On story I thought was really brilliant because it brought this kind of, I was like, if Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster were around today, 17-year-old today, they'd be playing with iPods and you know, be really into going to Comic-Con and checking out all the booths, and like, they would have created a hero that reflected like this kind of infrastructure that we built our world on. Because that's what they created for their hero, is this kind of American dream, the Midwestern American dream. In the On story, that hero actually exists in the internet. Is just a regular person outside of the computer. He goes into the computer and can like teleport all around the world, and I was just like, whoa, like for me, but not that I didn't. Efren, how did you feel like your Nick's story really showed that connection to Superman?
That's a good question.
Is there an answer?
Well, as I said before, last school year in English class, we did talk a lot about these revolutions that are happening in these corrupt countries where innocent families were subject to these horrid injustices. Well, I guess a good way to put it would be, I want to help them, but right now there's nothing I can do, so the best thing I can do is make people aware of it and make this character that can help them out. So, I guess that's the best answer.
Alonso, I had a question for you. We have about 5 minutes left, so I'm gonna ask like one more question. But you're like the resident comics historian, so like you know, you probably know more about comics history than. And I didn't think there was another person who knew more about comics history than I did, but Alonso kind of dumbfounds me on a daily basis. So, Alonso, how do you see the stories that were created for this issue? Like, what do you see in them? Like, what do
You mean like as they kind of relate to the Superman?
Yeah, it's the comics history. You know?
I guess, you know, for anyone that's not familiar with kind of Superman's early history, you know, he starts out not flying, he, you know, can run really fast and jump buildings and the like. And he starts out battling, you know, crooked politicians and wife beaters, very kind of New Deal stuff, you know, he was creating late 30s. And that was kind of the angle that these kids took. That's where they started, you know, there's no, you know, giant otherworldly supervillains here. And on that level, I feel like they really nailed a lot of the kind of underdog, taking care of the underdog and that kind of protection and responsibility that Siegel and Shuster really hit with Superman. You know, Siegel and Shuster were no older than most of the guys up here when they started batting around the idea of Superman. You know, they had gotten into early science fiction and were really into a lot of the early pulp heroes and wanted to do something a little bit more kind of social and super heroic, something that never existed. And so on a kind of primal emotional level, I feel like everyone up here really got that kind of that in a way that, you know, someone like Patrick or me, someone that's read a lot of comics, someone that, you know, people that are older, it doesn't, you know, resonate as kind of deeply and quickly as it does for them.
So I just want to reiterate, there was a couple things that I think I'm just impressed because I don't know if I could have done it at any of their respective ages as a student for the first time. And the first one of those things was accepting the challenge of coming into this class. The second thing that they did that was kind of amazing that they confronted was sitting in front of a Marvel comic book artist and getting their work critiqued. That takes an incredible amount of bravery that I have not ever really had for myself. So that's amazing. The third thing that they did was get it done. And the fourth thing they did was sit up here and present. Like, they're sitting up here and presenting their work as finished work when a week ago they didn't have anything done. That just blows my mind as far as like what that means for them as artists.
I also want to add, you know, they're doing an incredible job. Part of the 1 week challenge is selling the book. You know, they've got it, but they haven't stopped there. They're, you know, selling it. And, these guys are standing behind their work and really, you know, pushing it at our booth I3, right under the Cafe Express sign, end of row 1000.
I3, yeah, at the end of row 1000.
Cafe Express sign, you can't miss it. But you know, they're doing an amazing job. You know, really standing behind this work, which is, it's hard to do when, you know, there's things you would change. You know, it was done really quickly. There's things, you know, I'd like to change in my cover inks. But you know, they're proud of it, as they should be. And you know, please support them. Come flip through it. Offer words of encouragement. And buy one.
Yeah, so quick round of applause for these students. So like we said, it's in I3. Actually, no, we have some copies with us right now, and all of the students are able, for the first time since the con is open, to actually sign them. So if you're really interested in getting one, please feel free to come up and buy one. We're about to vacate the premises, so you can follow us out of the hall and do that. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.